Hi, it's Nancy Schick again. I'm an attorney, mediator, and conflict resolution coach in New York City. And this is part two of my response for Aaron, who asked, when is it time to give up on a client who repeatedly refuses to follow the advice or plan that they're actually paying him for? So yesterday I did the recording and answered this using the 7 choices. So if you haven't watched that, I invite you to take a look at it. It's part one. It'll be labeled part one. The second part of this is where now that we've gone through the process of making the 7 choices and getting a little bit more connected to what's going on with Aaron around the conflict, is now we can take a look at what's going on for the other person. And how do we do that? We invite them to have a conversation, right? Not that difficult, but it's surprising how often that we will try to work this all out on our side only, forgetting that there's another person involved and presenting them with the ultimatum without involving them in the problem solving, right? So that's what we do in mediation. It's what I do when I'm coaching people, when I'm serving as their lawyer. It's really about engaging them in the conversation so that we can have as close to a mutually agreeable resolution as possible. Again, mediator, I love the win-win, and that's what I'm going for. And I think that's what most of you would really prefer. I know that there are situations where maybe you don't feel that way and you wish you could just blow up the relationship entirely, burn the bridge, never have to see this person again. But that's usually because there's a lot more going on. So again, if you haven't watched the first part, go back and watch the first part. We're going to get into now what happens next when you're ready to approach the other person. So you want to be able to define the conflict very succinctly, right? We don't need a lot of background and story and everything else around it. It doesn't mean that's not valuable. It doesn't mean that your feelings around it are not valid, etc. But by the time you're approaching the other person, if you're going to be results focused, you want to define the conflict as succinctly as possible. So in Aaron's case, it's a conflict more than likely of Aaron and his client disagree about the way that the plan should be implemented, right? Pretty simple. And if you take all the other stuff away of, well, you did this, et cetera, and just focus there. The issue is we have a plan and it's not being followed, and therefore we're not getting the result. So that's the conflict. That is action 1. And again, I had this, sorry, I already gave the 10 away, but I'll do this again later. And if you really want one, send me a direct message and I can come up with some for you. Okay, so action 2 then is to start getting into what are the interests that each party has in this particular conflict. And that's what that means is we get into what are the beliefs that are driving the conflict. What is it that Aaron thought he was supposed to be doing for the client? What did the client think Aaron was supposed to be doing? What do they believe about the proper way to do this type of job? What do they believe about what works and what doesn't work? Because sometimes, right, you try something and it doesn't work right away, so you just assume it doesn't work and you want to move on. But there's sometimes just a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done. So you want to look at, are you hung up on the way it should be done, or are you open to trying something new? Right? If you don't try something new, you're probably going to get the same results that you've been getting. And this is the conversation that Aaron needs to have with that particular client. And when we're going through the interest, we ask them, what is it you believe? What is it you expected? What is it you want? And what is it you need now, right? Because sometimes what we think we want and what we need, as we start working through a process, we learn that the circumstances are different than we thought, and we might need something a little bit different. And we need to be able to adapt to that. That's why these are ongoing conversations. And as Jamie Campbell and I mentioned in the Persuasive Conversations course that we have in the Third Ear Listeners School, it's thirdearlisteners.com. It's technically the Third Ear Conflict Resolution School, but you'll find it at that particular website. So we talk about that too, is that, a relationship is a series of conversations. And if you think you're just going to have, one, like you think of a marriage, you don't say, hey, will you marry me? They say yes. Then you go and you say, I do. And then you never have any conversations again. You never have any conflict. Yeah, I know that's not the way it's told to us as kids. You live happily ever after, but this is the story after the happily ever after, and how do you create it? That's a whole different conversation as well. But it's really about getting into that. And what I find over and over is there are, in conflicts like this, it's that there were expectations that weren't being fulfilled, but they weren't necessarily expressed either, right? So once they start having this conversation, I'm sure Erin will let me know how it goes, but I suspect that they're going to have a whole different understanding of what needs to be done, which creates a whole different opportunity for what the results might be. Brings us right into action number 3, which is to play with the possibilities. So sometimes to get them warmed up on this, I will ask the question of, if you could have this conflict resolve in any way possible, what would it look like? And I ask each one of them to just play with the possibilities then, and open their mind to all the things that are available to them that they sometimes forget when they're in conflict, right? Because what happens is this part of our brain, the amygdala, starts to freak out when it senses that there's some sort of danger, right? And we perceive danger in this world the same way we would have perceived it if we were living in the wild and a tiger was going to eat us. And we just have to remember to control our brain around that. So just, you know, you're not going to get eaten because you are having a conflict with the client, more than likely, unless your client is a tiger, literally. Probably not going to be able to have this conversation with them. So I joke a little bit because I want you to also realize that what's going on inside you is often worse in your head, right? It's, again, it's this part of your brain really trying to keep you safe. And it means well, right? But it maybe just hasn't evolved for where we are. So I'm inviting you to just play a little bit. Don't get hung up on there's only one way to do things. And that's what tends to happen, right? When we get scared, we default to what we know. And what we know in this situation is that Erin probably wouldn't have been hired by this client if what had already been done and had always been done was getting the results. So it's just about, you know, getting in there and getting behind that fear and creating a pathway to walk it together or not, right? And it's a lot of being willing to try something on different and open to the possibility that you don't know everything. There's a big, big world out there. And I think the older I get, the more I understand how little I know. And there's a course that I did. I think you can probably go to an introduction where they'll talk about this at Landmark Worldwide. So if you don't know Landmark, you can look them up. They do transformational work. It has some mixed reviews, but I got a lot out of going. And one of the most dramatic images that I come to a lot was this idea that there's an infinite amount of knowledge in the world, right? And so if you think about it in terms of, you know, here it is contained, how much of that do you think you know? And how much do you know that you don't know? So if it's not 50-50, what's all that other stuff, right? It's because there's a lot of stuff in the world that you don't know, and a lot of it you don't even know you don't know. So just play here, just play with the possibilities that there is something that you're not seeing, right? And that's what we do in action 3. Then after we've had that exercise, and this is usually in a mediation or a group coaching session where we're working with multiple parties. You can do this for yourself though, also, if you're just not getting results you want in your life. But in this situation, we're talking about Aaron, and then we would potentially, you know, this is what he's doing with the client on his own, then look at creating the future, right? So now you've kind of played with the possibilities and what you might be able to do. And then you start choosing which actions you want to take. And I usually ask them to give it a very specific timeline, usually within a week, and then actually, you know, take those actions, right? And then see. So which brings us right to then the action 5, which is to stay on PARR. And that's to plan, act, revise, and repeat. And I throw that in as a separate step because I think people forget that they're not going to get the instant result, right? Not all the time. Sometimes that works. Sometimes you can do nothing and it'll work itself out. In this situation with Aaron and his clients, probably not going to go that way. But if they plan their work, work their plan, right, and they keep revising it, they're probably going to get the results that they want. So I like to remind them to stay on PARR, right? Plan, act, revise, repeat. This is not a one-shot deal. This is about life. This is about relationships. This is about multiple conversations. And that's what we do in the third-year conflict resolution process. So if you've used the process, I also invite you to share your comments, share your results. If you have questions that you'd like me to address in future videos, please put them in the comments. I am here for you. I am such a champion for you having the life that you want. And I just say, hang in there, we'll get you there. Thanks, bye.